This is the Page Publishing Book Club. How you doing? I'm Ella Stockton Rossini. Anusharta is living in Utah, taking exams to get her medical degree from Iran recognized here in the U.S. Her journey's been difficult in a way many of us could never imagine. The name of her book, The Escape Attempt.
Well, the thing is that I have spent a long time of my life, I can say wasted it on negativity and feeling trapped and feeling that I was a victim. Of course, a big part of it was situational, but I always had this feeling that I was a victim or I couldn't do anything about it. That was my destiny and so on. So after that, I took the first step and I realized that I have to accept that. First of all, I have to accept the feeling that why I felt that way. I have to accept the pain and identify it and recognize the pain and see how can I can deal with it. So this feeling that I had, use it in another way. So I used it to help me to get my hope back, to get hope back, and to start doing something. When I started to do something, I could little by little get out of this feeling and open new ways to me. This book is a part of a dream that I had before. So I have actually written about this dream that I had, and I was in this situation. Well, not literally, but emotionally. And I think it's very important to always have this hope inside that we can deal with the pain. We just can sit there and feel trapped and feel as if it is the destiny, or we can just think that God will someday help me, or we can just get up and do something about it and use this pain to bring back hope and to deal with it and to do something to open new doors to ourselves.
Did you ever find out what was causing you to feel the way you do, or you did?
Yes, part of it was situational because I have lived in Iran, so it was under a theocracy. It was ruled by a, merciless regime that never cared about people, and I was brought up with this fear always that I was trapped and I had to be not the way I wanted to be. It was a very simple thing. Even in choosing my clothes, I didn't have this freedom or this. Everything was limited, and I had this feeling that I have to do what they wanted me to do and not to be myself. So this feeling actually raised from that way. And then I went to Romania. I studied medicine there. And there was also some feelings like that because Romania was also a country that I couldn't actually thrive. And then I went to Belgium. Belgium is a very beautiful country, but unfortunately, a lot of problem in Belgium because of my diploma. So I just gave up, and just thought that that is not working, and I'm not going to do anything with my life. So my life is just wasted. And then the time I could immigrate to America, I think here is a blessing for me. Coming to America actually changed all the feeling that I had before. So I just tried to say, okay, I am now in America and I have to do something about my life here. I don't have that limitations, that fear that I had in Iran, that problems and obstacles that I had in Romania or in Belgium. So here, everything depends on me. I don't depend on God, or I don't depend. I don't feel trapped. So I have to do something with my life here. Here is America, is different, and so I took the very, very first steps, in my life to rise, actually, to stand up. But I am still in the middle in the process. But I know that everything depends on me, and I don't feel victimized or trapped to anything. And I know that everything depends on me. But I have to say that I feel very lucky that I am in America. I think it's the best country in the world, really.
Oh my gosh. When did you come here?
I came here about 3 years ago, but not completely. It's not completely 3 years, but 2 years and I think 10 months. Yeah.
Was it hard for you to get out of Iran?
I was 21 when I left Iran. So my father actually sent me and my sister to Romania to study medicine there. So it was not difficult at that time to go out because we were students actually. But then after that, after I finished, I went back to Iran. So I stayed there for 4 years, and then after that, I got married and I went to Belgium. So I was kind of lucky to be able to get out of Iran, and I consider myself a lucky person. But those people who are at my age and they have lived in Iran, they have been struggling so much, and they have, yeah, they have actually tolerated so much. I mean, I really empathize with them. I feel that I was a lucky person to be able to go out of Iran, but I really, my heart is with those people. I know that they are struggling, and I hope that they will free Iran very soon from the Islamic theocracy that is actually within their lives. But I really want to tell people never to feel trapped and just never think that you have a pain. So you have to identify the pain, deal with it, and use it in the best way you can, and help yours. And everything depends on you. Everything. You can open all the doors if you really want to. It's very difficult. It's not easy. It is very difficult, but you can do it.
All right, Anush. All I can say is if you can do it, so can anyone else. Thank you so much. A former assistant director of investigations for the state of New Jersey, Michael Albright, writes books now. He was inspired when he met a woman while visiting his son during cancer treatments at Mount Sinai in New York. If you're a Page regular, you've heard this story before. She told him she was abducted by aliens. Well, this is a follow-up to his first book for Page entitled It Begins, Part 2. All right, so bring us up to speed, Michael.
Part 1 opens up where two planets millions of years ago collide and send asteroids out into space. So that comes up later in the books. The story begins where a Transvaal aircraft was on its last trip across Zambia when it simply was engulfed in a white light and rose vertically into the sky. At the same time, on the other side of the world in Brazil, another passenger aircraft disappeared into the heavens. However, this time the bodies were returned and left on a secluded beach, and they were discovered, obviously, and all the internal organs had been removed from the people. And there was a lone girl, young girl, left as a survivor to give testament to the desecration of the people. In response to this and other things, the United States Navy organized the top secret organization known as Space Command. And what they were doing was, during the growing years, they were obtaining all advanced weaponry to fight the aliens because it was recognized that they are a threat. And a new commander took over, a Rear Admiral Michael Scott, and he leads Space Command into battles against the aliens. And he has big staff, and they carry the fight forward. I left off in part 1 where they had discovered a spy within Space Command, an alien spy. Part 2, they determine who the spy is. The aggressiveness of the aliens becomes more pronounced. They're in the attacking mode, and what they're doing is trying to conquer Earth and overtake Earth for their benefit. And that's why they removed the bodies and the blood. And the secret is that they wanted the blood, okay? They want human blood in order to adapt themselves to Earth. The main goal is to take over Earth. So Space Command went on to locate what they call a Z2 aircraft, which is a cigar-shaped aircraft on the bottom of the ocean in the Pacific. So they went out to salvage it. And what happened was the aliens attacked them. And they blew off half of the fleet in a battle. And then Space Command launched their experimental aircraft, and they wiped out the alien threat within a few seconds. So the aliens retreated, and there was a submarine on the bottom of the ocean that sunk, I think it was 3 or 4 of the alien ships as they were moving in on the wreck. And later, under the cover of a asteroid coming into Earth, another alien ship came down towards the cigar-shaped craft and blew it out, just blew it up. And the reason why they blew it up, they figure, was because of nanotechnology locked in the spacecraft. And they're searching and searching for the aliens and taking them on whenever they could find them. Eventually, the asteroids came into Earth's atmosphere and pebbled the dark side of the moon. The Space Command scientists, through observation, were able to determine that the dark side of the moon is actually on fire because of the different chemicals that were being emitted. And Space Command launched an attack on the far side of the moon and actually wiped out their whole garrison. But the story will continue. And Space Command, the Admiral Michael, made contact with another alien whose race was wiped out by the Greys, and they formed a friendship and eventually became allies, which they will become allies in the third book.
Where do you get the ideas for this? You said you were an investigator for the state of New Jersey. Were you investigating aliens?
No, criminals.
Oh, okay. It just felt like aliens sometimes. All right, Michael, keep the stories coming. Vicki L. Gardner has also been on the show a couple of times to talk about her series, The Adventures of Darby. It includes The Ghost of Morgan Gulch, Darby and the Dullberry Dare, and now Darby Meets Town Hall. So tell us where you left off at the end of the last book.
Where we left off at the end of Dullberry Dare is Darby brought Shurka back to Dullberry Dare. Shurka had been holding up in the Cave of the Haunted. Darby brings him home to Dullberry Dare, where Shurka is integrated into the town, meets the little Meites. They all become friends. Shurka is an honorary chief's apprentice and gets his feathers, and that's where the story ends. And then I take off into Darby Meets Talltown, again, going on the adventure and getting Shurka back to Talltown. And my thought about this book was that Shurka really needed closure with his estranged family. And also Darby wanted to show Shurka how the Meites from Dullberry Dare earn their feathers that they wear in their sleeves. So the story takes Darby and Shurka on an adventure to pick pine berries for Darby's mother. And along the way, they run into a little girl who has lost her puppy. So Shurka and Darby help her find her puppy. And during this little adventure with little Addie, who's lost her puppy Milo, Darby brings up the concept of taking Shurka into Talltown, where also Addie lives, to find his family. He misses them. He wants to reunite with them. And so the tale takes them into Talltown, where Addie gets home with her found puppy, and Shurka finds his estranged mother and father. They reunite. They ask him to come back home. Darby goes home being grateful he has a family and a home to go to every day. That's the storyline for Darby Meets Talltown.
How you making out with this?
Most of my stuff is online currently. I have not really had a lot of opportunity to get out and about, though I do talk a lot to my friends. I talk to my family, talk to my peers and colleagues online. I associate with a lot of people, of course, on social media, converse with other authors and early reader parents, where this book fits in. So I do get a lot. I would like to do more. I would like to get out into the public, do some book signings, as well as talk to the schools as well, the elementary schools, about the books too. I currently have my Ghost of Morgan Gulch book in one of my grandson's elementary schools, and we're planning on putting the Darby series in there as well, and talk to the children about being an author and what it's like to write these little adventures.
You must be so excited.
I am excited, very elated. My little grandson keeps asking me when he's going to see my books in his school and when the librarian's going to be bringing me in to talk. He is so excited as well.
So that'll be a nice springboard for you.
It will be, yes. It'll be fun, and I'm really looking forward to that.
All right, Vicki, keep on. I don't know how you do it because you have a pretty intense job.
I do, full time and then some. And then I just love writing, and so I love to squeeze that in wherever I can.
Does that relax you?
It does. It's quite a release of that stress and often frustration of the work life. You get into those little stories and you work with the little kids, and it really is a relief, and it's a delight to share the messages and share the stories with the little kids.
Yeah, definitely a world away from Lockheed Martin, right? Thank you so much. David Hawk is a farmer in Indiana and he writes for his own enjoyment. But when he got the idea for his book, The Impromptu Heroes, he had to publish it.
I'm not really sure. I remember I've always liked telling stories, and just one day this plot just sort of come into my head and I started thinking about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it, and I started writing it.
We've got Ross and Jade Compton. That's the couple.
That's the main couple. Yes.
They're in San Bellevue.
San Bellevue. It's based in Central America, in that general area there. Yeah.
Okay. And we have drug cartels and a mercenary named Rafael Ramon.
Correct. The country's overrun, and they get trapped there. Their group gets trapped there, and they're really struggling to get out. And they do get some of the people out, but Ross and Jade end up getting stuck there, and everything goes against them. And they're in a very tough situation. Their lives are being threatened all the time, and they have to start doing things they never dreamed they would have to do in order to make it home. And they weren't trained to do any of this stuff. They didn't want to do any of this stuff, and they never expected it. But they're thrown into this situation where they have to do a lot of things to get out in the middle of a revolution. There's some weapons, and this group that's running the country has very strong hold over it, and they're having to slip between the cracks and get away. And in the process, they're trying to help some other people get out, and they have to do a lot of things they didn't think they'd ever have to do. I can't tell you anymore. I don't want to give the book away.
Are people surprised to find out that you're an author?
A lot of people are. It really has surprised me, because the word got out a few months ago when the book was going to be published. And I'll have people say, "Did you write a book?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And they said, "Well, that's great." And it has surprised a lot of people. And I've been getting a lot of questions about it, and people really are intrigued over it. I'm planning on trying to do some local stuff, some book signings, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm very happy about this book. I'm very proud of it. It's a lifetime thrill. I mean, it's not very often you have a dream in your life that you actually have happen and get to live, and I feel like I'm getting to do that this time.
Oh, good for you, David. Enjoy every second of it. Renee Barton works for a printing company, ironically enough, in Missouri. Now she has 4 books published by Page. Now, what are they?
My series that I'm currently writing is called Forever and Always My Love. And my first book is called Ezekiel. And then they just finished up my next 2 books of this series. It's the Forever and Always My Love series. And then I have this listed as The Den of the Wolves, Book 2, Parts 1 and 2. So it's kind of confusing. Book 2, Part 1, Book 2, Part 2.
Do the books stand alone? Do we need to read Ezekiel before we read The Den of Wolves?
Oh, yes, ma'am. You've definitely book 1. I actually enlist parts of my life as I've grown up into it, and then I kind of twist it into a supernatural vampire slash werewolf type thing into it. So actually, the first part of the book that you read is my actual life from my own perspective as I was growing up. When I was younger, my mom and dad got divorced and we moved from St. Louis pretty much out in the BFE zone. And I talk about life kind of growing up out there, how different it was in the middle of nowhere. I called it farm country in my book because pretty much it was farm country. You got cornfields and the whole works. And we lived in what was a town in the 1800s. At the time I didn't really care, but now I think it's pretty cool because I talk about it in my book and I describe like my stepdad, he owned the property that had the old bank building and the old jailhouse, and he owned the old post office. So I describe all that in my first book. Then my character meets Ezekiel, who turns out to be a supernatural. But during this time, this girl is trying to figure out, how all this has come to be. And then her and Ezekiel become more, but she has no idea what is in store for her. With Ezekiel, you leave off that she ends up having to leave her whole life behind because things have happened in the book that have caused her not to be able to confide in her own family. And she has nowhere else to go, so she just picks a spot on the map and leaves the state. This is where book 2 comes in, part 1, The Den of the Wolves. She ends up finding a new fresh start, and then this is where she meets a whole nother group of characters who become her family in the next book. And, Ezekiel comes to play, and I'm hoping to be able to have the whole thing wrapped up in another 3 books.
Okay. So what happens in the Den of Wolves that's, significant?
She starts working for a company which happens to be run by werewolves. And during this time, she's still questioning herself as to how she's become supernatural, which that happens in book 1. And she can't figure out how she has become a supernatural being because her family is all mortal. So throughout the series, you have to sit here and wonder, well, how did she become the supernatural beast? Because her family is mortal. Anyway, in part 2, she meets the werewolves. And in my book, it's a taboo for the werewolves to mix the bloodlines with the vampires. So my character is a vampire, so to speak. Renee, the main character. And so she ends up with one of the werewolves. And then a whole nother thing ensues with their elders because it's against their way of living for the werewolves and the vampires to be together. So that's kind of where this is at right now. But then Ezekiel comes back into the picture and it kind of stirs up a whole nother pot with the werewolf and Ezekiel. Because I know my sister kept saying, are they going to get back together? Are they going to get back together? Everybody kept asking me, and I'm like, you got to read the book. So, yeah. So it's kind of the werewolf vampire with Ezekiel, and then they're the Giovanna twins, is what I call my werewolf. They're the alpha males of their pack in my book. So from book 2, you find out more about the werewolves and their way of living, and it kind of rolls into book 3. Everyone has to read it to find out what happens with Renee and Ezekiel and the werewolf alpha male twins. Just read it. You got to read book 1 and you got to keep going to find out what happens.
All right, Renee, thank you. Geraldine Edie McCann says God started giving her books to write in 2010, and now she's published Third Watch Prayer Manual. So what do you mean God gives you books?
It's like when you have a relationship with God, it's just like you and I are talking.
Right.
He talks to you. And so sometimes it's an audible voice, sometimes it's through a dream or something, or sometimes it's just it's like you hear a thought. It's kind of like hard to explain if you don't really know what I mean, but you know that it's him. And then as you just start writing, and then the words just starts to come and come and come. This is a prayer manual. This book is geared towards 3 groups of people, but it's for all people, whether you familiar with prayer or if you don't have prayer practices or what have you. But this book is to encourage you to really develop a relationship with God, to really know him on a personal basis and have daily fellowship with him. That's basically what the book is about, because he's calling his people, trying to get their attention so that he can just be in relationship with them and receiving messages from him, finding out what our assignments is, the things that he wants us to actually pray about, because we don't really know what specifically we're called to pray into. We know that we can pray about everything, of course, but there's some specific things that God is saying for each person as an individual that he wants to pray through. Say, for instance, sickness. I can pray for someone that's sick. Of course I can, because I'm not the one that's doing the healing. But if God has called you or someone else specifically to focus in that area, you can get the job done on a better basis than I can, because this is what God have called you to do. And we don't know what God have called us to do until we get in relationship with him and learn the many ways he talks to us, and just get familiar with hearing his voice and be comfortable and not be afraid, of him, or thinking he's this big God in the sky that's trying to wait for you to fail. And sometimes we feel like we have to be perfect in order to talk to God, and that couldn't be further from the truth. So this book, it explains that, and it really conveys God's heart. It's a book of love and relationship when you just break it down.
Do you remember when you first heard God?
Yes. I've been in relationship with God for 38 years. And I remember when I would have visions and dreams, and just even the first time I heard his voice. And I remember everything that I went through. I was fearful when I first, because I had never heard of anyone having an experience like that. But as I began to give myself to the Lord and just be open and just kind of relax in His presence, and when you praying, when you develop a prayer, good prayer practices, when it comes familiar to you and you're doing it on a regular basis, you come to it's just like anybody in any relationship. You get to know him. He's just not sitting visibly next to you, but you feel his presence and you know that he's there. And once you get comfortable with him, it's just like you walk and talk, you drive and talk, you whatever, and he's everywhere at the same time. So um you just begin to know these things as you get in relationship with him.
All right, Geraldine, thank you so much. And that is it for this edition of the Page Publishing Book Club. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget, you can download the podcast at 710WOR.com. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. I'll catch you next time.